The hardest thing about turning 42 isn't the wrinkles that have started creeping around your eyes, or the way your back aches after a long day showing houses. It's the suffocating feeling that your life has taken its final shape. That's what I was thinking as I stood in the doorway of Suds and Cents, clutching the workshop flyer like it was a summons rather than an invitation. "Ms. Mitchell? We're about to begin." The workshop coordinator motioned toward the last empty seat. Of course I'd be late. 3 house closings in one day will do that. I slid onto the wooden stool, surrounded by women at least a decade younger than me, all excited about making damn soap like it was some revolutionary act. But my broker had been clear. "Beatrice, you need to network outside real estate circles. Get creative. Find those millennial clients before Johnson Realty does." So here I was, about to make artisanal soap with strangers on a Thursday night. "Everyone partner up." The instructor clapped her hands with unnecessary enthusiasm. Before I could scan the room for another reluctant participant, a whirlwind of red hair and freckles dropped onto the stool beside me. "Mind if I join you? I'm Callie James." Her smile was disarming, green eyes bright with an eagerness I'd lost somewhere in my 30s. She couldn't be older than 26. "Beatrice Mitchell," I replied, trying not to sound as stiff as I felt. Fair warning, my creative skills ended with failed pottery class in college. Her laugh came easily. "Perfect. I'll handle the creativity, you can manage our expectations." The instructor distributed essential oils, and that's when disaster struck. Callie reached for the lavender, knocking over a bottle of something citrusy that splashed across my cream silk blouse, a $200 investment in my professional appearance. "Oh, damn. I'm so sorry." Callie grabbed napkins, dabbing at my blouse with such genuine distress that my annoyance evaporated faster than the oil seeping into the fabric. "It's fine," I lied, knowing the blouse was ruined. "Hazards of soap making, I suppose." "I feel terrible. Let me pay for dry cleaning, or replacement, whatever it costs." She bit her lower lip, a gesture so naturally flirtatious, I had to remind myself this was just an awkward situation, nothing more. "Really, don't worry about it." I waved her off, turning attention back to our soap project. As we worked, mixing oils and selecting scents, I learned Callie was trying to open her own boutique. I've been making soaps from my apartment, selling at farmers markets. But I need a real storefront. "Commercial real estate happens to be my specialty," I said, surprising myself by pulling out my business card. Not because I was hunting for clients, but because I wanted an excuse to see her again. "No way. Talk about perfect timing." She tucked my card into her pocket. "I've been looking for someone who gets small businesses. The last agent showed me spaces that would bankrupt me before I sold a single bar of soap. By the time we finished our soaps, hers perfectly molded with embedded dried flowers, mine lopsided but functional, I'd forgotten about my ruined blouse. Instead, I found myself lingering as she described her business vision with passionate gestures and ambitious plans. "You're not what I expected from this workshop," she said as we left, the cool autumn air hitting our faces. "What did you expect?" "Someone less." She studied me, substantial. I laughed. "Is that a polite way of saying old?" Her eyes locked with mine. "That's a direct way of saying interesting." Standing under the streetlight, something electric passed between us that had nothing to do with business networking, a moment that made me uncomfortably aware of my heartbeat. "I'll call you." "About those properties," she said. "I'll answer," I replied, already knowing I'd pick up on the first ring. Walking to my car, I told myself this flutter of excitement was simply about landing a new client, but even then, I knew I was lying to myself. Something unexpected had started, and for the first time in years, I couldn't predict where it might lead. 2 weeks passed. I'd almost convinced myself the soap workshop was a one-off encounter when my phone rang on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. "Beatrice Mitchell speaking," I answered in my professional voice, while juggling paperwork for a commercial listing that wasn't moving. "Hi, Beatrice, it's Callie." Her voice sent an immediate jolt through me. "From the soap disaster? I've been staring at your card for 2 weeks trying to work up the courage to call." I found myself smiling involuntarily. Professional inquiries don't usually require courage. Who said this was strictly professional? There was a playful edge to her voice that made my stomach flip. Before I could respond, she continued. But yes, I do need your expertise. I'm ready to find my shop space. Are you available? We arranged to meet the following day. I spent that evening doing something I hadn't done in years, worrying about what to wear to a client meeting. I settled on a navy pantsuit that my ex once said brought out the blue in my eyes. The first property was a disaster, water damage and rent that would bankrupt her fledgling business. As we walked through, I found myself apologizing. I wanted to show you the full spectrum of what's available, I explained as we exited the musty space. Always start with the worst to make the good ones shine? Callie asked, standing closer than was strictly necessary. Something like that. The second location had promise, corner visibility, good foot traffic, but as Callie inspected the storage room, she brushed past me in the narrow doorway. Her hand grazed mine, lingering just a moment too long to be accidental. The contact sent warmth spreading up my arm. Sorry, she murmured, not sounding sorry at all. By the fifth property, a pattern had developed. Each time we entered a new space, she'd ask my opinion, listen intently, then find some reason to touch me. A hand on my shoulder when looking out windows, fingers brushing as we exchanged paperwork, standing close enough that I could smell the lavender in her handmade soap. It was driving me quietly mad. What about this alcove for a demonstration area? She asked, pulling me by the hand to a sunlit corner of the fifth property. Perfect for workshops, I managed, acutely aware she hadn't released my hand. Like where we met, she said softly, finally letting go. Sometimes the right connections happen in unexpected places. After the fifth showing, she suggested drinks to discuss options. Common enough with clients, but the way she said it, looking up through those lashes with a half smile, made it clear this wasn't standard business practice. We sat in a quiet corner of a wine bar downtown, the professional pretense wearing thinner with each sip of Cabernet. Why real estate? She asked, leaning forward. Divorce, I answered honestly. Needed a fresh start at 35. You can't beat the independence. Your ex was an idiot, she said matter-of-factly. I nearly choked on my wine. You don't know anything about my ex. I know they let you go. That's enough evidence of poor judgment. Her directness was unnerving. And soap making? How does one fall into that? My grandmother, she smiled. She taught me when I was little. After college and 3 soul-crushing corporate jobs, I remembered what actually made me happy. As the evening progressed, our conversation drifted miles from real estate. I found myself laughing more than I had in months, maybe years. When her hand found mine across the table, I didn't pull away. You know, she said, her thumb tracing circles on my palm, you're everything I thought you'd be that first night. Intelligent, thoughtful. She paused. Beautiful. The compliment hung between us, demanding acknowledgement. Callie, I started carefully, I'm 16 years older than you. I'm your realtor. This is 2 people connecting, she interrupted. Age is just a number on a form, and you won't be my realtor forever. I withdrew my hand, reality reasserting itself. We should focus on finding you the right property. She leaned back, assessing me with those penetrating green eyes. Fair enough, for now. Walking to our cars, she paused. I know what you're thinking, Beatrice. You're thinking all the reasons this is a bad idea. But I'm patient. And I'm very, very persistent. As I watched her drive away, I knew I was in trouble. The line between professional and personal was blurring, and for the first time in my carefully reconstructed life, I wasn't sure I wanted to redraw it. I found it on a Tuesday, the perfect space for Callie's soap shop. A charming storefront with large windows and natural light that would showcase her colorful creations beautifully. The moment I walked in, I could envision her there, arranging displays and chatting with customers. The rent was reasonable, the location ideal, and most importantly, it felt right. I immediately called her. I found it, I said when she answered. The one. The space or the woman? She replied, that playful lilt in her voice that had become both thrilling and terrifying to me. The space, I clarified firmly. Can you see it today? She arrived wearing a flowing green dress that matched her eyes, her red hair pulled back in a loose braid. The wonder on her face as she explored the empty shop made my chest tight with something dangerously close to affection. "Beatrice, it's perfect," she whispered, spinning around in the center of the main room. "Absolutely perfect. There's a small apartment upstairs," I added. "You could live and work in the same building, cut down on commuting." She moved toward me, taking my hands in hers. "You really found it. My dream space." "That's my job," I replied, trying to maintain professionalism despite her proximity. "Let's celebrate," she declared. "Dinner tonight, my treat." I should have declined, should have maintained boundaries. Instead, I heard myself saying, "I'd like that." She chose an intimate Italian restaurant downtown. Over candlelight and wine, I watched her animation as she described her plans for the shop: custom blending stations, workshop areas, seasonal displays. Her passion was intoxicating. "None of this would be happening without you," she said, reaching across the table to cover my hand with hers. "I just showed you spaces," I demurred. "You're the one with the vision." "You saw me," she insisted, her thumb brushing over my knuckles. "Really saw me. Do you know how rare that is?" Her touch lingered, warm and deliberate. The restaurant seemed to recede around us, noise fading to background. When she leaned forward, her intention clear in those green eyes, panic surged through me. I pulled my hand away. "Callie, we can't do this." "Why not?" she challenged softly. "For starters, I'm old enough to—" "If you say be my mother, I'm walking out," she interrupted. "Age is just a number." "It's not. It's experience, life stages. I've been married and divorced. You're just starting your first business. So we're in completely different places. Not to mention I'm still technically your realtor." She sat back, studying me with frustrating composure. "Those sound like excuses, not reasons." "They're realities," I insisted. "Professional boundaries exist for a reason." The drive home was quiet, tension thick between us. Outside my house, she turned to me. "Thank you for finding my perfect space," she said formally. Then, leaning across the console, she brushed her lips against my cheek, lingering just long enough to make my breath catch. "Good night, Beatrice." I watched her drive away, fingers touching the spot where her lips had been, feeling like I'd narrowly escaped something, or perhaps missed something essential. The next morning, a package arrived at my office. Inside was an exquisitely wrapped artisanal soap, deep blue with gold veins running through it. The note read, "Like you, complex, elegant, worth taking time to discover." See, 2 days later, another package, a different soap, this one with dried lavender. For stress relief when overthinking what could be beautiful. They kept coming, each with notes that were both thoughtful and gently provocative. "Your eyes reminded me of this blue. This scent made me think of your laugh." For hands too beautiful to be lonely, my assistant Emma raised an eyebrow at the 6th delivery. "Secret admirer?" "Client," I corrected. "Clients don't usually send gifts that make you blush," she observed shrewdly. After 2 weeks of soap deliveries, I arrived at my office to find Callie herself perched on the edge of my desk, chatting animatedly with Emma. "Surprise," she said, smiling. "I signed the lease paperwork this morning. I'm officially no longer your client." "Congratulations," I managed, acutely aware of Emma's interested gaze. "I just wanted to tell you in person," Callie continued, "and to invite you to dinner, as a thank you." She glanced meaningfully at Emma. "A completely professional thank you, of course." After she left, Emma leaned against my doorframe. "That's the soap lady, isn't it?" "Her name is Callie," I said, trying to sound neutral. "She's gorgeous," Emma observed, "and clearly into you." "She's young." "Not that young." Emma shrugged. "And she looks at you like you hung the moon." That night, alone with a glass of wine, I stared at Callie's latest soap, creamy white with specks of vanilla bean, The note read simply, "Some things are worth the risk." My finger hovered over her number in my phone. Professional boundaries seemed increasingly irrelevant in the face of her persistent, gentle siege on my defenses. I've never been one for grand openings, especially as someone who usually works behind the scenes. But there I was, standing in front of Suds and Serenity on its inaugural day, clutching a housewarming gift and feeling more nervous than I had for any date in 20 years. Callie had transformed the space in just 6 weeks. The formerly empty storefront now glowed with warm lighting illuminating handcrafted wooden shelves lined with colorful soaps. The air was a symphony of essential oils, lavender, bergamot, and something earthy I couldn't identify. "Beatrice, you came!" Callie rushed toward me, radiant in a teal dress that hugged her curves. Before I could respond, she pulled me into a warm embrace. "I was afraid you might not." "I wouldn't miss it," I said honestly. "The place looks incredible." "Come meet everyone," she said, taking my hand and leading me through the crowd. "This is my special friend Beatrice," she introduced me repeatedly. "She found us this perfect space." Special friend. The term hung between professional and intimate, making my cheeks flush each time she said it. I noticed how she kept finding reasons to touch me, a hand on my back guiding me through the crowd, fingers brushing mine when passing a glass of champagne. The evening progressed in a blur of introductions and congratulations. I found myself watching Callie from across the room, captivated by her ease with people, the way her laughter carried over the crowd. There was something magnetic about her confidence, her certainty in her path. "She hasn't stopped talking about you, you know." I turned to find a woman about Callie's age studying me with friendly curiosity. "I'm Zoe, Callie's best friend," she explained. "And you're the realtor she's been obsessing over for weeks." "I just found her this space," I deflected. Zoe laughed. "Right. And I'm sure all those handcrafted soaps she's been sending you were just business gifts." As the crowd thinned, Callie found me again, eyes bright with excitement and perhaps too much champagne. "Stay after?" she asked quietly. "I have a special reserve bottle of wine I've been saving." Wisdom said go home. Desire said stay. For once, desire won. When the last guest departed, Callie locked the door and led me upstairs to her small apartment above the shop. The space was simply furnished but distinctly hers. Colorful pillows, plants everywhere, sketches of soap designs pinned to a corkboard. She opened the wine and we settled on her small balcony overlooking Des Moines' modest skyline, the autumn air crisp around us. "To new beginnings," she toasted. "To Suds and Serenity," I countered. We sipped in companionable silence before she said, "You've been avoiding me." "I've been busy," I hedged. "Liar," she said softly. "You've been scared." The directness of her assessment left me defenseless. "Yes," I admitted. "This scares me." "What exactly is this?" she pressed. "Whatever's happening between us." I gestured vaguely between us. "I'm too old for you, Callie." "That's for me to decide, isn't it?" "It's not just that. I've been hurt before. My marriage." I trailed off, surprised by my own vulnerability. "Tell me," she said, moving closer on the small love seat. The wine and the night and her presence loosened something in me. I told her about my ex-husband, the slow deterioration, the devastating discovery of his affair with a younger colleague, the humiliation of starting over at 35. "So, you see," I concluded, "I'm not eager to set myself up for that again." "Do you really think I'm anything like him?" she asked, her voice low and serious. "No. But I'm still the same person who didn't see it coming then. Who wasn't enough. Beatrice." She took my wineglass, set it aside, and clasped my hands in hers. "You are more than enough. You're extraordinary. And your ex was an absolute idiot who couldn't recognize what he had." Her sincerity was disarming. When she leaned forward, I didn't pull away. Her lips met mine tentatively at first, then with growing confidence as I responded. The kiss deepened, her hand finding my face, drawing me closer. She tasted like wine and possibility. When we finally separated, both breathless, she whispered, "I've wanted to do that since the night we met." Something between panic and desire fluttered in my chest. "Callie, Don't overthink it," she said, pressing another soft kiss to my lips. "Just feel." Our second kiss grew more urgent, years of my careful restraint dissolving under her touch. When she stood and offered her hand, leading me toward her bedroom, I followed without hesitation. In the soft lamplight, we discovered each other slowly. Her skin was smooth under my hands, her sighs the sweetest music I'd heard in years. Each touch, each kiss erased another layer of my defenses, until there was nothing left but sensation and connection. After, lying in her arms, I felt simultaneously lighter and terrified. Lighter because something long dormant had awakened in me, terrified because I had no idea what came next. "Stop thinking so loud," Callie murmured against my hair. "Sorry. Occupational hazard." "Stay tonight," she said, not a question but not quite a demand. I nodded, allowing myself to sink into her embrace, pushing tomorrow's complications into the future where they belonged. Morning light filtered through unfamiliar curtains, momentarily disorienting me. The weight of an arm draped across my waist brought last night rushing back. Callie's shop opening, wine on the balcony, and everything that followed. I eased myself up, careful not to wake her. In sleep, she looked younger than her 26 years, red hair splayed across the pillow, freckles prominent in the morning light, beautiful, yes, but also so damn young. What was I doing here? I slipped from the bed and gathered my clothes, scattered evidence of impulsivity I rarely allowed myself. In the tiny bathroom, I stared at my reflection, a woman in her 40s looking thoroughly kissed, hair disheveled, wearing yesterday's wrinkled blouse. My phone showed 3 missed calls from the office. When I emerged, Callie was sitting up in bed, sheet pulled to her chest, watching me with those perceptive green eyes. "Running away?" she asked quietly. "I have a closing at 10. Not a lie, but not the whole truth either." She patted the bed beside her. "Come here first." Against my better judgment, I sat on the edge of the mattress. She reached for my hand. "Regrets?" she asked. "Complications," I corrected. "Last night was amazing," she finished for me. "Yes," I admitted, "but also impulsive." "I don't do impulsive, Callie. Maybe you should more often." She smiled, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. "Your hair's different when you sleep, softer." The intimate observation made my chest tighten. "I need to go." She nodded, accepting but clearly disappointed. "Can I call you later?" "Yes," I said, surprising myself with how much I meant it. The day passed in a blur of paperwork and client meetings, but Callie lingered at the edges of my thoughts like a persistent melody. Twice I caught myself smiling at nothing, earning curious looks from Emma. Around 4, my phone rang, Callie's number. My heart shouldn't have raced that way. "Beatrice." Her voice sounded wrong, tight, strained. "What's wrong?" "I need your help." She was speaking quickly now, words tumbling over each other. "The building owner just came by. He's accusing me of stealing antique light fixtures from the basement storage. Says they're worth thousands. He's threatening to call the police." "What? That's ridiculous." "I know. I've never even been in that part of the basement. I don't have keys to the locked sections." "Did you tell him that?" "Yes, but he doesn't believe me. Says only tenants have access to the building after hours, and they disappeared last weekend when I was doing inventory. I'm coming over." The words left my mouth before I could consider the implications. "Don't say anything else to him until I get there." Arriving at Suds and Serenity 15 minutes later, I found Callie pacing behind the counter, face pale beneath her freckles. The shop was empty of customers. "He left," she said when I entered. "But he's coming back with the police if I don't confess and pay for the fixtures." "Tell me everything," I said, slipping into problem-solving mode. She explained how Walter Griffith, the elderly building owner, had appeared that afternoon in a rage about missing brass light fixtures allegedly stored in the basement. valuable antiques he'd planned to install in another property. "I've never stolen anything in my life," she said, voice breaking. "I worked so hard for this place, Beatrice. If he presses charges, even if they're dismissed later, the publicity could ruin the business before it even starts." I took her hands, steeling myself against the familiar flutter her touch caused. "That's not going to happen. First, we need a lawyer. I can't afford. My brother-in-law is an attorney. He owes me a favor." One phone call later, we had legal advice. Document everything. Don't speak to police without representation, and gather evidence of whereabouts during the weekend in question. "I was here all weekend doing inventory and setting up displays," Callie said. "But I was alone most of the time." "Security cameras?" "Only in the main entrances, not the basement." I paced the shop, thinking, who else has access to the building? The property manager, maintenance staff, other tenants. "Listen," I said, sitting beside her on the small sofa in the customer lounge area. "I believe you. We'll figure this out." She looked up at me, eyes shining with unshed tears. "I was afraid you might think that you're a thief?" "Not for a second." She leaned forward then, capturing my lips in a desperate kiss that took me by surprise. I responded instinctively, cupping her face in my hands, tasting salt from tears she couldn't hold back. When we parted, she pressed her forehead to mine. "Thank you." "For what?" "For believing me. For coming when I called." "Of course," I said, realizing with startling clarity that there was no "of course" about it. 2 weeks ago, I'd been determined to maintain professional distance. Now I was entangled in her life in ways I couldn't have anticipated. As I held her, my mind was already working through next steps: security footage, witness statements, alibis. The realtor in me knew the building's layout, the likely placement of valuable storage, the access points. If someone had framed Callie, we would find out who and why. What scared me most wasn't the accusation hanging over her. It was how quickly, how completely I'd committed myself to fighting alongside her, and what that said about my feelings for this woman who'd crashed into my carefully ordered life like a comet, leaving nothing untouched in her wake. The building's security system was more sophisticated than I expected for a property this size, a small blessing in our current predicament. The property manager, a perpetually harried man named Davis, reluctantly agreed to let us review the weekend footage after my brother-in-law made some carefully worded legal threats. "I still don't see why this is necessary," Davis grumbled as he led us to a cramped back office. "Mr. Griffith is certain about what happened." "Mr. Griffith is mistaken," I replied firmly. "My client did not take those fixtures." The word client felt strange on my tongue. Callie was so much more than that now, but it carried the weight of professionalism we needed. Davis left us with access to the security recordings, making it clear he had better things to do. Callie squeezed my hand gratefully before we turned our attention to the grainy footage. Hours passed as we watched the weekend's comings and goings. Callie appeared several times, always entering through the front with supply boxes or leaving late, clearly exhausted from setting up shop. No basement visits. "There," she said suddenly, pointing at the screen. It was Sunday night around 2 a.m. A figure in a hooded jacket entered using an access code at the back service entrance. "That's not me." I leaned closer. "The build is similar to yours. Hair looks reddish under the light." "It's not me," she insisted. "I was home in bed by midnight every night." We watched as the figure moved with purpose through the hallway toward the basement access door, face carefully angled away from cameras. "They know where the cameras are," I observed. "This isn't opportunistic." "Look at the shoes," Callie pointed. "Those are men's boots, size 11 at least." The footage showed the person returning 40 minutes later, carrying a large duffel bag that hadn't been there before. "That's our thief," I said, "but we can't see their face clearly." "Wait." Callie leaned forward. "Pause it there." I froze the frame. As the figure adjusted the heavy bag, their hood slipped back just enough to reveal a glimpse of red hair. "Someone's trying to frame me," she whispered. "They're even wearing a wig." We examined the remaining footage, finally identifying the figure's car, a dark sedan with a distinctive dent in the rear bumper. "Do you recognize it?" I asked. "No, wait." Her face paled. "I think that's Oliver's car, the property manager's nephew. He helped with some maintenance when I first moved in." "Why would he frame you?" "I don't know. He asked me out for coffee. I declined." "Some men don't handle rejection well," I muttered. Armed with our suspicions, we formulated a plan. The security footage wasn't clear enough to definitively identify Oliver, but it was enough to cast reasonable doubt on Callie's involvement. We needed more. If he stole the fixtures, where would he hide them? I wondered aloud. "Probably not at his place if he's trying to frame me," Callie reasoned. "Maybe his car? Or a storage unit? Let's watch for his car. See where he goes after work." That's how we found ourselves sitting in my car outside the building the next evening, waiting for Oliver to finish his maintenance shift. "This feels like a bad detective movie," Callie whispered, huddled beside me in the passenger seat. "Minus the fedoras and whiskey," I agreed, passing her a thermos of coffee. As she took it, our fingers brushed. Even now, with accusations hanging over her and her business in jeopardy, that simple contact sent warmth curling through my chest. I'd spent years building walls around myself, yet here I was, conducting amateur surveillance for a woman I'd known less than 2 months. Oliver appeared around 9, locking up the service entrance. We followed at a discreet distance as he drove not home, but to a small self-storage facility 15 minutes away. "Should we confront him?" Callie asked as we watched him unlock a unit. "Not without backup," I said. "But now we know where to look." The next morning, my brother-in-law arranged for a police detective he trusted to meet us. With the security footage and our information about the storage unit, Detective Martinez obtained a search warrant. We weren't invited for the search, but Martinez called that afternoon. "You were right. Found all the missing fixtures, plus some other items reported stolen from other buildings Griffith owns." Relief washed over Callie's face when I told her. "It's over?" "Not quite. They're bringing Oliver in for questioning. You'll need to make a statement." Hours later, exhausted but vindicated, we returned to my car in the police station parking lot. The tension that had been coiled in Callie's shoulders for days finally released as she leaned back against the headrest. "Thank you," she said softly. "I couldn't have done this without you." "You could have," I countered. "You're stronger than you think." She turned to face me, the parking lot lights casting shadows across her features. "Maybe, but I'm glad I didn't have to." The cramped confines of the car created an intimacy as she reached for my hand. "Stay with me tonight?" Common sense said to go home, to create distance after the emotional intensity of the past few days. But as her fingers intertwined with mine, I found myself saying, "Yes." We drove through the quiet streets of Des Moines, the night wrapping around us like a promise of safer days ahead. Whatever this was between us, this unexpected, complicated, thrilling connection, it had survived its first real test. And somehow, that terrified and exhilarated me in equal measure. I'd forgotten what it was like to be the subject of gossip. In my 20s, I'd been too busy building a career to care. By my 30s, I was married and respectable. The divorce had caused a brief flurry, but nothing like this. The story broke in the Des Moines Register 3 days after Oliver's arrest. Local business owner cleared in theft ring bust. The article mentioned Callie by name, described her as assisted by local realtor Beatrice Mitchell, and included a photo of us leaving the police station together, my hand protectively at the small of her back. By Monday morning, my office was buzzing. "Quite a weekend, huh?" Emma said, dropping a coffee on my desk with a knowing smile. "Just helping a client," I replied automatically. "Clients don't look at you the way she does in this picture." I glanced at the newspaper she'd brought in. There we were, Callie looking up at me with unmistakable affection, my body angled toward hers like a sunflower to the sun. Anyone with eyes could see we were more than realtor and client. "It's complicated," I muttered. "Because she's younger?" Emma asked. "Or because she's a woman?" The question caught me off guard. I'd been so focused on the age difference that I hadn't considered how others might view two women together. Des Moines wasn't exactly conservative by Midwest standards, but my professional circle was traditional. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus Sanders, one of my biggest commercial clients. Saw the article. Need to talk about the Wilson property. Lunch? At the country club, Marcus wasted no time. So, you and the soap girl, he said as soon as we were seated. Her name is Callie, I corrected, immediately defensive. And she's a successful business owner. Hey, no judgment. He held up his hands. Just surprised. Didn't know you were. He trailed off meaningfully. Were what, Marcus? My voice was sharper than intended. Into women. He finished, looking uncomfortable. Look, Beatrice, we've worked together for years. I respect you. But my investors are pretty traditional. They were counting on your reputation. My reputation as a realtor is impeccable, I said coldly. My personal life is irrelevant. The conversation moved to business, but the damage was done. By week's end, 2 other clients had found excuses to delay projects or explore other options. I didn't tell Callie. Her shop was flourishing after the publicity from the theft case, and I didn't want to tarnish that. Instead, I started making excuses to see her less frequently. Busy with clients, working late, too tired. She noticed, of course. What's going on? She asked one evening, calling me after I'd canceled dinner plans. You've been pulling away all week. Just swamped with work, I lied. Beatrice, her voice softened, talk to me. It's nothing. If it's about us being public now, we can be more discreet. It's not that, I interrupted, though it was exactly that. I just need some space. The hurt silence that followed made my chest ache. Space, she repeated finally. From me. From everything. I amended weakly. I see. Her voice had gone flat. Well, don't let me crowd you. She hung up before I could respond. 3 days of miserable silence followed. I threw myself into work, ignoring the concerned glances from Emma and the emptiness that followed me home each night. On the 4th day, she appeared in my office doorway. Your assistant let me in, she said. I told her it was about property issues. She looked beautiful and determined in a simple green dress, hair loose around her shoulders. Callie, I'm busy. Too busy to explain why you're ghosting me after everything? I closed my office door. I'm not ghosting you. I just needed space. Right. She crossed her arms. The truth, Beatrice, now. The direct challenge broke my resolve. I've lost clients, because of us, because of that picture in the paper. Her expression shifted from anger to understanding. So you're pushing me away to save your business. It's not that simple. It really is. She stepped closer. You're scared of what people think, of being with someone younger, of being with a woman, of actually being happy for once. Each accusation landed like a physical blow, because each contained a grain of truth. My entire career, I began, is important, she finished. I get that. But so is this. She gestured between us. At least I thought it was. It is, I admitted quietly. That's what scares me. Then fight for it, she challenged. Fight for us. When I didn't immediately respond, she nodded as if confirming something to herself. Call me when you decide what matters more, she said, turning to leave. Your carefully constructed image or something real. The door closed behind her with a quiet click that felt more final than a slam would have. I sank into my chair, the office suddenly suffocating despite its familiar comfort. Emma appeared in the doorway minutes later, concern etched on her face. You okay? No, I admitted honestly. I've made a mess of things. Because you care what Marcus Sanders thinks? She asked shrewdly. Because I care what everyone thinks, I corrected. Emma leaned against the doorframe. My aunt is 62, her partner is 48. They've been together 20 years and they're the happiest couple I know. She left me with that thought, the simplicity of it cutting through my tangled justifications and fears. What was I really afraid of? Losing clients, or losing the safe, predictable life I'd rebuilt after my divorce? 3 days after our confrontation in my office, the property manager called to inform me that Oliver had confessed everything to avoid maximum charges. Turned out the kid had been stealing from multiple properties, selling the antiques to fund a gambling habit. The confession cleared Callie completely, but my relief was overshadowed by the silence between us. I hadn't called her. She hadn't called me. Pride and fear had created a stalemate neither of us seemed willing to break. "You look miserable," Emma observed, dropping a stack of contracts on my desk. "Just call her already. It's complicated." I muttered for what felt like the 100th time. "It's really not." Emma perched on the edge of my desk. "You're in love with her. You're just too stubborn to admit it." The word love hit me like a physical blow. Was that what this feeling was? This constant awareness of her absence, this ache when I passed her shop and didn't go in. "She deserves someone who isn't afraid to be seen with her," I said finally. "Maybe let her decide what she deserves." I spent that evening reviewing the security footage we'd gathered, studying the moment that had brought us together in a different way, not as realtor and client, but as allies, partners. I remembered the determination in her eyes, her refusal to be wrongly accused, her faith that we could prove her innocence. The next morning, I found myself outside Suds and Serenity before it opened, a peace offering of coffee in hand. Through the window, I could see her arranging a display, red hair caught up in a messy bun, completely focused on her task. My heart contracted painfully at the sight. She looked up as I knocked, surprise flickering across her face before her expression became carefully neutral. After a moment's hesitation, she unlocked the door. "Beatrice," she said, her voice giving away nothing. "I brought coffee," I offered lamely, holding up the cups. "Can we talk?" She took the coffee but didn't invite me further in. "About what?" "I owe you an apology." The words came easier than I expected. I was afraid of what people would think, of what it meant for my career, of how I feel about you. And now? Now I'm more afraid of losing you than losing anything else. Something softened in her eyes, but she didn't move toward me. "It hurt, Beatrice. You pulled away without even talking to me." "I know. I've spent years protecting myself, building walls. It's a hard habit to break." "I'm not asking you to tear them all down at once," she said quietly. "Just to let me in sometimes." I nodded, throat tight with emotion. "I'd like to try that." She studied me for a long moment before stepping back from the door. "Come in, I have something to show you." Inside, the shop smelled of new soap batches, citrus and cedar. She led me to a workbench in the back where several bars were lined up, drying. "I made these last night," she said, indicating a row of sapphire blue soaps flecked with gold. "I was going to call them Midnight Clarity. They reminded me of you." The gesture, so simple yet so intimate, broke something loose inside me. Without overthinking, I pulled her into my arms and kissed her, trying to convey everything I couldn't yet say. When we finally broke apart, she smiled against my lips. "I take it you like them?" "I like the soap maker better," I murmured. We spent the morning together in the shop, the tension between us gradually dissolving as we fell back into the easy rhythm we developed before. She told me about new wholesale accounts. I shared the news about Oliver's confession. "So, I'm officially cleared?" she asked. "Completely. In fact, Griffith owes you an apology. I'll settle for him renewing my lease next year." She paused, studying my face. "Are you really okay with this? With us? Because if you're going to panic again when someone makes a comment." "I won't," I interrupted. "I can't promise I won't struggle sometimes. This is new territory for me, but I promise I won't shut you out again." A customer's arrival interrupted anything further, and I watched with admiration as Callie switched seamlessly into business owner mode, expertly guiding the woman through various soap options. That night, parked outside her apartment, we sat talking for hours, planning our next move against the rumors and subtle professional backlash. "We could stake out his car," Callie suggested with a mischievous grin. "See if he comes back for more. Or we could just enjoy the fact that you're exonerated," I countered, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Where's the fun in that?" She caught my hand, turning it to kiss my palm. I like us as amateur detectives. The intimate gesture sent warmth spiraling through me. I like us as anything, as long as we're together. Moonlight filtered through the windshield as she leaned across the console, her kiss tender and unhurried. It felt like coming home to a place I hadn't known I was searching for. Stay tonight, she whispered against my lips. As we lay together later, sharing truths we'd never told anyone else, I realized that what had started as physical attraction had deepened into something I hadn't felt in years, maybe ever. The vulnerability terrified me, but the alternative, losing her, was unthinkable. I was married before, she confessed softly in the darkness. Right after college, it lasted 8 months. What happened? I asked, tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. I realized I was pretending to be someone I wasn't, someone who wanted what everyone said I should want. I understood that feeling all too well. And now? She smiled, visible even in the dim light. Now I'm exactly where I want to be. 6 months can change everything. That morning in June, as I signed the investment papers making me an official partner in Suds and Serenity, I caught myself smiling at how much had shifted since that first soap-making workshop last autumn. "You're sure about this?" Callie asked, watching me initial the last page. "About investing in the fastest-growing artisanal soap company in Des Moines? Absolutely. About mixing business with pleasure," she clarified, her eyes serious despite her smile. I set down the pen and took her hand across the attorney's desk. I've never been more sure of anything. The expansion had been Callie's idea, adding a second location in the trendy East Village district. My investment made it possible, but she'd insisted on clear terms. This was a business decision, not charity. Her fierce independence was one of the countless things I'd grown to love about her. "Congratulations, ladies," my attorney said, gathering the papers. "The paperwork will be filed this afternoon." Outside, the June heat hit us like a physical wall after the air-conditioned office. Callie linked her arm through mine as we walked to my car. "Partner," she said, testing the word with obvious pleasure. "In every way," I agreed. The past 6 months hadn't been without challenges. Marcus had indeed taken his business elsewhere, along with 2 other clients, but for every client lost, I'd gained new ones, some specifically seeking me out after hearing about my role in exposing Oliver's theft ring. Emma had been right. My professional reputation remained intact. What changed was how I viewed myself. No longer just the divorced woman who'd rebuilt her career, but someone capable of taking risks again. Someone worthy of love. "I have something for you," Callie said, as we pulled into the parking lot of her shop. "Wait here." She returned minutes later with a small package wrapped in brown paper and tied with twine, her signature gift wrap. "What's this for?" I asked, carefully undoing the twine. 6 months since our first kiss," she replied, watching me unwrap what appeared to be a bar of soap. But it wasn't just any soap. "I call it beginning again," she explained as I examined the perfectly formed bar. "Lavender for the workshop where we met, citrus for our first real conversation, and a hint of sandalwood because I mentioned once that it was my father's aftershave," I finished, throat tight with emotion. "You remembered that?" "I remember everything about you," she said simply. I leaned across the console to kiss her, amazed still at how naturally it came now. "I have something for you too," I admitted. "But it's not here. We need to take a drive." "Mysterious," she teased. "I like it." The lavender farm was an hour outside the city, rows of purple stretching toward the horizon under the summer sun. Callie's delight was evident as we pulled into the gravel parking area. "Are we collecting ingredients?" she asked, excitement brightening her eyes. "Something like that." I led her through the fields to a small gazebo overlooking the valley, where I'd arranged for a private lunch. The table was set with wildflowers and fine china, a bottle of champagne chilling in an ice bucket. "Beatrice," she breathed. "This is beautiful." Over lunch, we talked about everything and nothing. New soap formulations, my latest listings, the novel she was reading. Ordinary conversation made extraordinary simply by being together. "Close your eyes," I said when we'd finished dessert. "I have one more surprise." When she opened her eyes, I was holding a small velvet box. Not a ring, too soon for that despite how certain I felt, but a vintage silver locket I'd found in an antique shop. "It's beautiful," she whispered, as I fastened it around her neck. "Open it." Inside was a tiny sprig of dried lavender, preserved behind glass. "From the workshop where we met," I explained. "Emma helped me get it from the instructor." "I love it," she said, touching the locket gently. "I love you." The words hung in the summer air between us. We'd been circling them for months, both cautious for different reasons. "I love you too," I replied, the declaration surprisingly easy now that the moment had arrived. "Even though I'm too young for you?" she teased, echoing my early protests. "Especially because you were brave enough to pursue me despite my objections." Her laugh was bright in the quiet afternoon. "Best decision I ever made." On the drive back to Des Moines, Callie's hand in mine, I realized that life rarely gives you what you expect. A year ago, I'd been a divorced realtor in her 40s, convinced that passion and surprise were for other people. Now I was a woman in love with another woman 16 years younger, CEO investor in an artisanal soap business, and happier than I'd been in decades. "What are you thinking about?" Callie asked, catching me smiling. "How we met," I replied honestly. "How making soap with strangers led to this." "Not strangers anymore," she pointed out. "No," I agreed, squeezing her hand. "Not strangers at all." Back at her apartment above the original shop, we stood on the small balcony watching the sunset Pont Des Moines in shades of gold and pink. Her head rested against my shoulder, the scent of lavender rising from her hair. "Begin again with me," she said softly, turning to face me. "Not just in business." In her eyes, I saw everything I'd been afraid to want: passion, challenge, partnership, and a future I couldn't predict but couldn't wait to discover. "I already have," I replied, pulling her close under the fading summer light.